Alex Lightman, he's a CEO, author, and policy advisor, one of the pioneers of the wearable computing. He has an intense track record in developing national policy to accelerate innovation, defense analysis, internet protocols, IPv6, 4G. He worked advising policy for the United States. So he's talking about the war that we didn't prepare for. So welcome to our stage, Alex Lightman.
1,885 people that we know to be infected. The real number is probably between 3 and 5 million at least. Deaths are 16,382, and recovered is 101,520. If you look here on closed cases, you see that 101,520 people are recovered or discharged, and we have 16,228. That death rate of closed cases is 14%. And when I first started cutting and pasting these statistics a few weeks ago, it was 7%. And many people were saying, oh, well, that's just because most people aren't tested and we haven't seen it, but it will go down. So all of the predictions, all the criticism were that it would go down from 7%. In fact, it's increased from 7% to 14%. So the death rate for closed cases has doubled. Now, I say this because there's some debate that's in the press right now about whether or not we can call this a war. And so I want to settle that by saying that a war, according to the United Nations, is a conflict between people that results in the deaths of more than 1,000 people in a year, in 12 months. And so right now, as I've just shown you, this year, and the quarter is not even over, in 1/3 of a year, we have 16,000 deaths. So this is actually a pretty big war. I believe that millions of people will die. And so part of this talk is to say it's the war we didn't prepare for. And you think I'm talking about COVID-19. I am, but I'm more talking about COVID-20. And I'm talking about other things because there's this idea that this is a false notion, that this is a once in 100-year pandemic. In fact, there are multiple coronaviruses. And though nature took millions of years to come up with 6 coronaviruses, just one lab has doubled that number. So there are more than 6 more things. And one of the things that you have to do overall, if you take one action as a result of this, it's to oppose the research for gain of function. So the idea of gain of function is that you infect an animal, such as a ferret or a civet or a bat, and then you put it among a lot of other things like it, and then they all get sick, and you find the sickest one. You go, oh, great, this is even sicker than the others. And you're trying to increase 3 things: the virulence, or the level of which it can be contagious, the pathogenicity, and basically you want to make it more contagious, more deadly, and you want to have the symptoms be delayed. And there are actually job postings at a lab in Wuhan which says, we want you to create viruses that suppress the symptoms for as long as possible. So this is a designed organism. And these articles that have gone out saying, well, it can't be because of this, this, and this, and they wouldn't have done that and that, because this work is an outgrowth. Where this came from is that the laboratory in Wuhan discovered this 12 years ago. You can go to my Facebook page. The article is there. It's all published 2008. And it says that this SARS-CoV couldn't go in to the ACE2 receptor, but then we changed it, the amino acids between 320 and 538. And once we made that change, we were able to penetrate with the ACE2 receptor. So it's right there in a paper. It's been around for 12 years. The person who did this research, Zhengli Shi, then went and got grants at UNC. And what they did is they basically gave infected ferrets, groups of ferrets, and then they go and just, you know, if you have enough ferrets, it's just like you can have an army of monkeys eventually typing the works of Shakespeare. If you have enough ferrets and you have millions of dollars and you can keep on infecting them over and over again, you can eventually make things have gain of function and make them more contagious. And so I'm not saying that this was released on purpose. I'm not saying it was accidental. Who knows? There are incidences of people working in labs in China who sold laboratory animals to be eaten at a marketplace. So this is a matter of fact. People have been prosecuted for this. And there have also been leaks And this is, by the way, not to pick on China, because the US also funded this work. The National Institutes of Health funded it, US AMRID funded it, and also USAID funded it. So both China and the US funded the same work that led to what we are suffering from now. So to get very, very practical, here are basically 4 things that you should have with you. 1, you should have a little envelope of cash. Why? Because sometimes what we find is that history doesn't rhyme, but history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And so if you go and you study what happened during the influenza, the so-called Spanish flu, which actually also originated in China, and people in Spain call it the Dutch flu. I have no idea why. But what happened is that when people needed ambulances to take them to the hospital, sometimes the drivers would require a bribe. They didn't start out that way, but if you have 20 people all calling you at once and you have to decide who's going to take, you have to be able to slip them some money. And the other thing is that when hospital beds are out, what they also did in 1918 was they also sometimes had to slip a bribe to get a hospital bed. I'm not saying that that's how it should be. I'm just simply saying that that's what happened in the last influenza, and you can either do it or not. You should have your passport so that you have an ID, and also in case there's a true disaster in your country and everything's falling apart, so that you have the possibility of leaving, because you may find yourself sometime going out for food, having a whole disaster, looting, something could go out of control, and you may just need to leave. Another thing that you will want to have is that you will want to have a test. So this is my test for SARS-CoV-2 RNA, not detected. And because people will want to know, you're going to have to have something like this to get into stores at some point in the future. You're going to have to do it to visit people. And if you've never had asthma, you still want to try and get one of these. This is an inhaler, and basically it has something called albuterol in it. Just go shake it up like that, and then you go, and it frees up and opens up your lungs. And you may not think that that's important. I had asthma before, then didn't have it, didn't set foot in a hospital for 30 years. And then suddenly, a week ago Saturday, I found myself unable to breathe. And I almost didn't make it. I didn't want to get anyone else sick. So I walked to the hospital. First time I'd been admitted to a hospital in more than 30 years. And this is what they basically gave me to help me to start breathing again. Another thing that you want to do, it's true what Timu said about masks, but you don't have to just have a mask. You want to bling up your mask, but bling it up from the inside. You can bling it up from the outside. And what you want to do is to take a paper towel and fold it up a few times. And then you want to have something like, I have an oil of it, but there's something called thieves oil. Thieves oil has remarkable ingredients in it. It basically has clove oil and lemon peel and cinnamon and rosemary. And this is called thieves oil because during the bubonic plague, during the Black Death, when people would die, there would be people who wanted to go into their house and steal stuff. And so they passed around that the way that you wouldn't get the plague if you went into the house was to spray your mouth with thieves oil. It burns, and also stick it in your ears and put it in your nose. And it does burn, but it burns good. And so you basically get you spray it on here, and then you put this in your mask. And you also, if you can, you want to have eucalyptus oil, clove oil, and you put that on. And so you should stink. There's a guy in an X-Files episode, Mulder said, stinks. And the guy said, stinky's good. Well, stinky's good here. And I was shocked when I went to the hospital, which is rated #1 to pick up my results. They made me come to the hospital to get them because CDC didn't give them. They told me to come and get them. So I wore my mask. And the lady at the hospital said, oh, what's that smell? And I said, well, it's cloves and thieves oil. And as it turned out, even though hundreds and hundreds of people were coming to the hospital with masks, nobody was doing these things. These have antiviral properties. So basically, I just want to emphasize and add, and this is what I arranged also with Marconi ahead of time, was that I would make comments and anything that I felt that could complement what Timu had to say, that I would add it. So I just want to go over really quick and show you other things that I'm taking. So basically, I'd say for tea, I highly recommend this Virugo Max tea with Coriolis drops and Astragalus drops, and also Bhutanese wild Cordyceps. So Cordyceps is a very important thing, and Timu mentioned it, but I want to hype it up. I want to say cordyceps is really, really, really important. So here's a question I ask people all the time, and maybe 1 in 1,000 gets it right. And you're going to go, oh, I got that. But most people don't. So here's the question. What element of the periodic chart of the elements are you and I mostly made of? Now, most people say water. Water's not an element. There's no water on the periodic chart of the elements. So that's wrong. And then people say hydrogen. Also wrong. That's number 3. And people say carbon. Well, that's number 2. But the number 1, you probably have guessed it by now, is oxygen. So by mass, we're about 60% oxygen. So one of the wars that we're fighting with now is the war to make sure that we stay 60% oxygen. And there's also a good measure of how well you process oxygen. It's your maximum ventilatory capacity measured in milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. And that's VO2 max. So I would ask you, how many of you know right now what your VO2 max is? Most gyms are closed. So if everything wasn't closed, if you have a way of doing it, if you're in a hospital and you have the ability to test your VO2 max, do so. Because in general, all other things being held equal, 2 twins, both get it, whatever, if one has a higher VO2 max, they have a greater chance of survival than one that doesn't. Because there are 4 components of VO2 max, and that could be a whole lecture in itself. But the bottom line is, it has to do with your tidal volume. How much lung capacity do you have? So anything that can build up your lung capacity is good. There's the how efficiently you take the oxygen and take it from your lungs into your hemoglobin. And this is the part that's attacked. This is the part that after the cytokine storm and the ripping apart of your epithelial cells and all that from the virus that leaves people with lung damage. And then there's basically how elastic your arteries and veins and capillaries are. How good is the circulatory system, the highway of your blood? And then it's how well does it offtake the hemoglobin into your cells? You want to be working on all these. And I want to emphasize that you really want, as Timu said, to do regular exercise. And what kind of exercise? If you can get a home treadmill and you can have the HEPA filters and all the stuff here and all the plants, and my ceiling, by the way, is covered with plants. I have all these plants, all that stuff is yes. You want to be able to run as much as possible because that's the number 1 way that you boost your VO2 max. So going quickly through this beta glucagon, cordyceps, you can get it in all kinds of different forms. Clove leaf, you want to be sniffing cloves, you just fall in love with cloves. Prednisone is a very good thing to have because it opens up your lungs. As far as food, this kind of thing has very antiviral properties. Yellow Barn, Biodynamic Pasta Sauce. I don't make any commission on selling any of these things, and especially the Yellow Barn Biodynamic Tomato Concentrate. You want to try and have some spaghetti, pasta things with these kind of things. They have good antiviral properties. Probiotics, as Timu said, nitric oxide boosting, polyphenomenal, this is a bulletproof product. Vitamin C. I would recommend up to, if you can stand it, you may get diarrhea. That's okay. It's not a big deal. 9,000 milligrams a day and or micrograms a day. And basically, you want to, let's see, here I have this. Okay, you want to be careful with it though. You can also get it intravenously. I got an intravenous thing with max vitamin C and it gave me an asthma attack. It's why I went to the hospital. Astragalus. And then this is the stuff that you may find it harder to get. But if you can get albuterol, a box of albuterol, and you can get a nebulizer mask, that can save your life. There are not enough ventilators. They're not even nearly enough. So the poor man's ventilator is albuterol sulfate. Basically comes in these little packages here. And a nebulizer mask can kind of save you time because if you're out, can't breathe, then every minute counts. And then also you have this Tamiflu tablets. Now, 2 more things. Timu talked about bacterial load, and there's also parasite load. The whole reason that we have sex for reproduction is because of parasite load. Because if you're an immortal organism and you're complex, you're going to accumulate parasites that you can't get rid of. But by having sex and starting you and someone else all over again, you start free of parasites, theoretically. And so another thing that our leaders and our medical people should be telling us is about the viral load. And there's 2 things that 2/3 of people have, and they're constantly wearing down your immune system. Now, when you're a kid, when you're a child, before puberty, you have a thymus. The thymus is like a mini heart up here. And the thymus is the finishing school for the immune system. And you're basically, you have these cells that come out of your bones and they go attach to the thymus, and through sort of osmosis and they learn what's you and what's not you. Now, if you have lupus or you have Hashimoto syndrome, they don't know what's you. Now, what happens is this terrible, terrible design flaw. And that design flaw is that the thymus degrades when it's exposed to testosterone or estrogen, both of which come up for men and women respectively during puberty. So your thymus shrinks and it goes from being big and red like a California strawberry at puberty to, by the time you're in your 50s, this little shriveled black thing like a peanut. It can be regrown, but there isn't enough time. But ideally, we would all have regrown our thymus if we had time for this. But what
so
you have,
Alex, it's amazing. It's a lot of stuff. So, but I'll have to just cut you because we are
okay.
in title control. But you brought a lot of stuff. So could you make after this document that you can share this? But in a sense that we should be very careful about how we use this, because
can I say the two viruses that you have to get rid of now, if you can, to reduce the viral load? The first one is you want to get rid of herpes simplex 1. 2/3 of people have it. 2/3 of people have herpes. It's constantly degrading your immune system. And so this idea that, oh, we're going to get rid of this virus with a vaccine, we haven't gotten rid of herpes simplex 1. So it's not, this virus may be with us for a long time. And the second thing is cytomegalovirus. No symptoms, but it's there degrading your immune system because your immune system, and there are treatments, but we're out of time for this. So you can look it up or you can contact me. Thank you for this time and attention. I appreciate the chance to share this information with you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I really appreciate your work and your very thoughtful comments.